Good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
You can see we have a number of participants here.
And we have a like. So let's just do a sound check. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Yes, super.
And can you hear me? Thumbs up. Ni hörs bra, skrev Kristoffer. Perfect. All right. We had a webinar a few weeks back about GA4 and BigQuery and SQL on how to get started. I was the one hosting that webinar with the help of Johan here, and now he's taking over to talk a bit about Google Analytics 4 and BigQuery plus Dataform. And over to you, Johan.
Thank you, Anton. I'm gonna see if I can. There you have it. Yes, very welcome. We're going to talk about Google Analytics 4 and BigQuery and how we can use Dataform as a tool to help us with this. And me that will be speaking is Johan Strand. I'm sitting in Malmö today, sunny sky outside, working at Control Digital as a senior digital analyst and have most experience working with e-commerce. So that's sort of the mindset I have when I go into this and sort of challenges that we need to solve. And what we will be talking about this morning is we're going to touch briefly on what benefits BigQuery can give us when working with Google Analytics 4 data. So sort of a follow-up what Anton did a few weeks back. Then we're going to talk about what is Dataform as a tool and what benefits it can give you. And then we're going to talk about how we can use Dataform to build a data library, a structured data library with our Google Analytics 4 data that our analysts can use. And after that, we will jump into Dataform and the interface, and we will show how to set some things up and how to run a few queries, and also demo how you can use it to structure your Google Analytics 4 data. So, we have touched upon this many times, but you're probably running Google Analytics 4 now, and you are looking or have just gotten started with working with BigQuery. And BigQuery is Google's data warehouse, SQL-based. And the benefits that can give to your GA4 reporting is we have secured data retention. We own and control the data, so no one else can remove it or we can't lose access to it. It's a lot easier to handle parameters. I mean, event parameters was a new thing in Google Analytics 4. Amazing for collecting data, but hard to use in reporting. But if we work in BigQuery, I think it's much easier. We don't need to fiddle around with custom dimensions or other limitations. We have 100% exact numbers. If we're working in the interface, we can often run into estimates and cardinality where we don't get exact numbers. With other data sources. I mean, in Google Analytics 4, we only have our web or app data. Sure, we can try to bring in Google ads, Facebook ads, sales data, and so on, but it's not that easy. It's so much easier working with a data warehouse such as BigQuery. We can modify historical data in many ways. If we're only working with GA4 and collect data, once an event is sent into GA4, you have very limited possibilities to modify that data or remove data. And we have transparent attribution. We will look more at that in the interface. But a challenge with Google Analytics 4, I mean, most of us use it for traffic acquisition reporting, but the attribution models are not that transparent. We just get numbers, sessions attributed to different sources. We don't know exactly what's happening under the hood. BigQuery can help us with that since we can build our own conversion models. So by now, I think you are all sold on BigQuery. So you have set up the GA4 export. follow the guide on the left, and you see that the tables are starting to build in BigQuery. You get one table for every day. But then you look at the schema on the right and say, okay, this is quite a complex data model. It's not like we got taught in school where we had perfect data. We go in, okay, I want to select revenue per day, bang. It's very complex. So we run into new challenges when we use BigQuery for GA4 reporting. And that is, it's all event-based, or almost everything is event-based. So we don't have session data. And most of the reporting we do is often based on sessions or maybe even user. We have inaccurate traffic source data, or nowadays we even have several sources for traffic source data. And we talked about event parameters. They are stored in a nested data structure, which is, I would say, amazing for storing data, but not great when it comes to querying data. It requires a lot of code and knowledge to understand how to even select a simple event parameter. And already exported data can be retroactively updated, so we have to take that into account. What I mean with that is, today it's Friday, so this morning we will get data for Thursday, yesterday, okay? But the data we got for maybe Wednesday and Tuesday, back earlier in the week, that could also be updated today. So data is alive for up to like 72 hours, and we have to take that into account as well. And what I mean with the asterisks is, yes, this autumn, they added in new fields that are called cross-channel campaign. And those should reflect the traffic acquisition that we have in the interface. So that makes it a bit easier, but as I said, we want to create our own attribution models, and this is based on the GA4 interface, and that is still a black box for us. So maybe this just added more complexity. Yes, we see them on the right, where we didn't get one field with easy to access traffic source data. We got 4 different. And a bonus problems that, yes, Google is working on improving the GA4 data feed. We are getting new columns and they are fixing bugs, but this won't help us that data governance is complex. And what I mean with that is, if you start off day one, you are one person, you have just learned some SQL, you have one data source, and in this case, the GA4 raw events table, and you create one query to create one report for our stakeholder. Okay, this is fine. No complexity, we can handle this. And we can say that we have raw data on the left and we have aggregated reports on the right. But over time, we will start to bring in more data sources. Maybe we have our Google Ads data, we have performance data, we need to join this. Okay, this is starting to add complexity. But sooner or later, it will look like this. We have several data sources, and we have several people working in our organization, all writing SQL with their own flavor, creating a lot of different reports, and it's quickly getting out of hand. What is the definition for different KPIs? How do we work with traffic source attribution, and so on? And these queries become more and more expensive to run. So the bill starts to add up. But thankfully, now that was the problems. Now we're going to talk about the solutions. Dataform to the rescue. And what is Dataform? Well, you see it on the right. We're going to see the interface. It simplifies your data processing architecture, I would say. And it was bought by Google in 2020 and is since then integrated into BigQuery seamlessly. It helps us with data orchestration. So it doesn't in any way replace BigQuery. We will still use BigQuery for storing and querying the data, but Dataform adds on top and helps us with orchestration and helping us manage complex workflows. You saw before where we had several queries and sources nested into each other. This is where Dataform will help. And it's a free service. you will still pay for BigQuery for storing and querying data, but Dataform itself is a free tool. And yes, so if we're then gonna zoom in on GA4 and the problems that we have run into when we are helping our customers with this is we only have event data. It's event scoped. So we need to turn this data into, so we have event scope data, session scope data, and user scope data, since we're going to use all of those scopes in our reporting. This will create a lot of tables, and we will have dependencies between these tables. So this session table will be based on the event table, for example. And then we will have to write quite a lot of complex code to clean the raw data from GA4. We need also to write a lot of complex code to build our session attributions. And the problem that I mentioned earlier, where the data that comes in today is not complete yet. It will be complete maybe tomorrow or on Sunday. That could be a factor. So we need to factor in all these. So now we're going to look at how Dataform can help with these. And where does Dataform fit in with our tools? Well, I would say that we have our raw data source, external platforms on the left. So this could be GA4, Bing ads, Google ads, Meta ads, sales systems, and so on. And we will use ETL tools to bring these data into BigQuery, into our raw data lake. For example, for GA4 and Google ads, it's available as a free service. For the other ones, maybe we need an ETL tool. So we will have raw data, and then we will use Dataform to structure it and build a structured data library with prep tables. We will look at these. And with those tables, we will then be able to connect visualization tools or machine learning tools for different APIs to visualize this data to our stakeholders. So as you can see, Dataform does not replace any of the other tools that we will need in our pipeline. And if we're going to build a structured data library for GA4 today, what tables do we need? Well, we already have the raw table. We got that for free. Out of that, I want to build a prepped events table. Every row in that table is still an event, but just a bit cleaned. And then based on that, we will build a session table where every row is a session. And we will have session ID as a key between these tables. So we can key, okay, these events belong to this session. And if we feel that we have use for it, we could also build a user table where every row is a user and we have a user ID as a key to which session and which event belong to which user. I think this is mostly useful if you have an option for the user to log in. So you set a user ID and you have a lot of data that you want to key to the user. So we won't look at that today. But as I said, we will be building a lot of tables, and these will have dependency. A nice thing with Dataform is that it handles dependencies between these tables. So here can we see that I had the raw table on the left, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tables that have been created by queries running in Dataform. And Dataform then sees, okay, this table have a reference to this table. So for example, the session table have to run before the events table, or sorry, after the events table. And the session table have to run before the user table gets updated. And a really nice thing with Dataform is that we will be using we will not be using SQL. We will be using SQLX, and that is where we have the option to use SQL merge with JavaScript, and that really helps us bringing more functionality into the code. So here, for example, I have written a function called getEventParam, a JavaScript function, and the code on the top, when it gets compiled, it compiles into the much more complex code. We will look more at that, how we can use SQLX and functions.
One question.
Yes.
The previous slide where you showed the orchestration, what would if you would do that with just BigQuery, with schedule query, how would you set that up, and what's the difference here?
You have a few different options. The most simple one and the most unreliable one would be that we schedule the events table to be updated at 8 o'clock, and then session table at 8:30 o'clock, and we hope that we don't get an error in the events table and so on. There are also options in, I will say, in Google Cloud to build this sort of dependencies and workflows yourself, but it will be much more complex. So we could, for example, have a listener listening for when the events table is updated in Cloud Log. And when that happens, we could trigger sessions. But so we could code it ourselves, definitely. But it's much more complex. Instead, we could just use Dataform to handle it for us.
So you could say that the orchestration itself, and instead of like scheduling at different times during the morning, this helps you to just set it up, and Dataform handle orchestration for you.
Exactly. We have these tables, these are the dependencies, handle it for us. And we could also have like error handling here. Like if we get an error in the sessions table, should a user table still be generated, and so on? Or should we throw an error sending an email to someone? Great. Okay, so we looked at SQLX. We will look at more of that in the interface. And another great thing is that Dataform have version control. So you could connect your Dataform repository to a GitHub repository, and GitHub will then handle versions and dev branches and so on. Before I worked with Dataform, I instead have to, like, whenever I made a change, I have to copy the original query into a notepad and save it just so I had it, or using saved queries. This is so much easier to have, so you can have several people working on the same project. And also, if you're happening to mess something up, you can roll back. You can also have test branches to test the whole pipeline on the side before you put it into production. So this is a really neat function. And it really helps us handling attribution models. Well, Dataform itself doesn't help us handle attribution models. We can still write a ton of SQL and solve this in BigQuery. But since a ton of SQL equals a ton of complex code, Dataform can help us handle it in a much easier way. So in this example, this is an example of a session table that we made. We have, so each row in this table is a session. We have the session date, a session ID as key, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different attribution models. So a direct, free last click, and a first click model. So the analytics team can then use this model and say, okay, we should use this attribution model in this dashboard, and it's already prepared for them. And you will see in the interface demo how much code that would be needed to code this every time you wanted to use it. And another great thing is that Dataform can really help us to handle these retroactive backfills that I was talking about, that the data is not ready for up to 72 hours, 4 days. And we can do that with incremental updates. So every morning, so today is Friday, well, today, and let's say we have 2 years of data, GA4 data in a data warehouse. Today, when we run and update our queries, we don't want to update 2 years of data. That will be incredibly expensive. We could just update the last 4 days every day. And Dataform handles that really nicely with what they call incremental tables, and there are several options for it. And we will look more at that in the demo. So, so before we jump into the demo, let's look at what data library I will suggest that you create for Google Analytics 4 to get started. So you have hooked up the batch export, so you get the events table, the raw events table every morning. And out of that, I want to create a structured, mostly cleaned events table. We have unnested the event params, and we have cleaned some of the fields. And out of that, I want to create a session table. And if we're working with Google Ads, I will suggest that we bring in the Google Ads transfer data as well and create a Google Click ID table where we have all the Google Click IDs and performance information tied to those. So we can join that into our sessions and say, okay, this session come from this Google Click, and that Google Click have this information tied to it. What campaign was it, placement, and so on. And if we feel that we have need for it, if we are working with user analytics, we could create a user table as well. And then our analysts will come in and use these prep tables to create reporting. And we can call it something like we have raw, unfiltered, unstructured data on the left. In the middle, we have a structured data library. Data is prepped and validated and cleaned and ready. And on the right, we have insights and algorithms and aggregated reports based on this data library. And I would say that, so our analyst is only working on the right. They don't access the raw tables. Then we could have a data engineer role on the left, setting everything up in Dataform, prepping the data, and as much of the logic as possible. So how do we define KPIs, attribution, revenue, and so on? We should keep on the left. That is so that analysts don't have to care about those things. They can go straight into analyzing the data. And this is an example of how an events table could look. So remember, every row is an event in this table. The most important thing is that we have unnested event parameters. So we have param, which is a struct with all the parameters available for us. And we have prepped the page location. So the main thing we do is that the page location is the URL. So we clean the URL of any unwanted parameters. We don't need query parameters. And we have also calculated the previous and the next page location. That is very common for like funnel analysis. When we look at a page view, we often want to know what is the next page location for that page view and what is the previous page location. So we have prepared that for our analysts. And also we could build something to categorize the page location. If we're on an e-commerce site, we could have tens of thousands of URLs. Well, we have categorized them into, let's say, these are product pages, these are brand pages, customer service pages, and so on. And if we look at the session table, every row is a session. The most complex things here are, I would say, the attribution models that we have in the bottom. In this example, we have a record with direct attribution, meaning we look in the session, what was the first source of traffic that we can find. If we can't find any traffic source information, it will be direct traffic. And the other one model is based on that, and that is more similar to how GA4, Pweek Pro, and so handle it. And that is, if a session don't have a traffic source, let's say Anton visits the site without a traffic source, we will look back on his user ID and see, does he have a session with a traffic source in the last 30 days? In that case, take that traffic source and attribute to this session as well. We will also have things as a landing page, when did the session start, when did it end, was it a bounce, and so on. So session-based information. And here we have the two different sessions, attribution models. Most commonly is source, medium, and campaign from the UTM tags. And then we have our channel group, such was it paid, social, organic, and so on. And we have the Google Click ID if we want to join on Google Ads data at a later stage. So, summarize before we jump into the interface. Dataform helps us orchestrate our SQL. It doesn't replace BigQuery in your organization. There is, I would say, no reason not to use. It's only upsides since it's free. It's a bit of time investment to get started, but it will be a huge return of investment in time over time. And as a customer said when we demoed this, that the amount of time we will save on this, working in this way, that gives me goosebumps. And I think that is a good sign that SQL gives someone goosebumps. Doesn't happen every day. So a lot of talking. So let's get into the interface and get nitty-gritty. I will take a sip of water. And prepare my screens. Yes, and also before I get started is that I have prepared a GA4 example repository that helps you create your first event table and your first session table, and that is what I will be demoing soon. So if you want the code and try at home, you could visit our GitHub or scan this link, and I think Anton will post a link as well, and you can find all the codes that I will be using in these examples there. So you don't have to write everything down. Yes, okay. So you see BigQuery now. And what we will do is, where will we find Dataform? First question. We will be in Google Cloud. We will be in BigQuery. And you will find Dataform in the left-hand menu under Dataform. And if this is the first time you go in here, you will probably be prompted, do you want to activate Dataform? You can click yes, and it will enable some APIs and so on, take a minute, and then you're in. And the first screen it comes to is where we will find all our Dataform repositories. It's mostly common that we only have one Dataform repository. If we have one GA4 account, if we're working with one site, if we want to have it more separated, say that we're working with different sites, different customers, we could have one repository for each customer or each site. And you click Create Repository, create a new one. We will not go through that today, but I'm definitely going to write a blog article now when I think about it, how to set everything up and test it. But since this is a demo, we have prepared a demo repository. Dive into that. Here we will have some settings that could be of interest. If we go, for example, to settings, we could connect this Dataform repository to a GitHub repository. It's very simple. You go to GitHub, you create a new repository, you have to generate an access token and upload that access token into Google Cloud and link it. It takes 5-10 minutes to prep that, and then you have version control and everything through GitHub. But we'll not do that today. Instead, we will look at our repository where we have a development workspace created. We need at least one. I think very often it's enough with one, but if we are several people working in the same project, we could have different development workspaces for each developer. So we jump in. Welcome to Dataform. Thank you. And we will see that we have a top menu that we will go through. And on the left, we have the files and folders in this Dataform repository. And yes, I said folders. We have folders to work with, which is amazing. So we can structure our SQLX files in a more structured way. And we could just create a new file just to show. Let's go maybe in basic. We can create a file and SQLX. And here we could write our code. So nothing strange. Let's remove that for now. So I have prepared a first query for us. And this is a very simple one. We will do select two fields from a prep table that I have. And one thing, so this looks like very ordinary BigQuery SQL. One thing that you might note is this thing that you don't recognize. And this is part of the SQLX, where we can escape the SQL and write JavaScript functions. So here we are calling constants referencing our include files. the constant.js. And in that, we have a variable called project that we're referencing. So let's go into our constants. And yes, we have a variable called project that have a reference to the GCP project that we're working in. So we have that here. So going back to the files, we can see here on the right, when this SQLX file compiles, it will turn into this. And there you see that the variable have been replaced with the value in the includes file. So this shows how we can mix SQL and JavaScript logic, and then it will compile into SQL that it sends to the BigQuery engine. And we could run this. And this is, as you can see, very similar to working in BigQuery, just running queries. This will create a temporary table, so it's not stored anywhere. As soon as I close this down, the data will disappear. We can also see that it runs using my personal account, the account that I'm logged in with. When we schedule workflows, we will use service accounts instead, so it's not tied to me. So if I quit and I lose access to this, the pipeline will still continue to run. Okay, can I move forward in my notes? And to make them a bit more complex, I've created a second query. And this is, here we're using the ref function. And we have a reference to the first query and the table that that query creates. So stay with me now. So we want the first query to run and create a table that is called first query. And after that, I want the second query to run, and I want it to select data from the first query. And if we want to visualize this, we could go into compile graph, and we can see that Dataform handles that dependency. So we have the second query, and that have a dependency to the first query. And we'll use that as its source, meaning soon I will run this, and I will show you that this will finish before this starts running. So let's go back to the code. Close that down. And this time we're not going to use the run preview. Instead, we're going to start a proper execution, execute actions, and we can in different ways choose what files or functions we want to run. So let's start. We're going to run the second query. Actions here means SQLX files, basically. So we're going to run the second query SQLX files. And I never remember which one it is, but we will click both to include both dependencies and dependents. And we'll start an execution. And we can go into details. And here we can see that it understood that it needs, if we want to run second query and all the dependent files, we also need to run the first query. But not only that, we can see here that the second query is pending. It have not started yet since the dependencies have not completed. So it starts by running the first query, and when that is done and we get a green check mark, it will start running the second one. So it have not started yet. So we will do a refresh, and we can see that, well, both queries finished so fast that we didn't have time to see it. But if we look at the start time, we can confirm that the first query ran and then the second query. And we could go into the destination in BigQuery. Let's see, yep, that. And it created two tables for us, the first query table and the second query table. Bing, bada, boom. So that shows us how we can use dependencies between different queries to handle dependencies. Okay, let's go back. So this view that I was in now, it was the executions view, where you can see all the executions in the last 24 hours, and we had a compiled graph, and we have the code editor. Okay. But I know we are all here for the Google Analytics 4 data, right? So this was just a basic demo. Let's go into the GA4 data. And I have prepared an event and session SQLX. And the code for those you will find in our GitHub. I will post the link to that. So if we look at it, make some more space. We can first look at the config block, actually. That is new for and is a tool in Dataform. And here we can set configs for the query that is about to run. And one thing is that we could set descriptions and column. And this will be passed on to the resulting table so that our analysts can find documentation for the table that they are about to query. We will look at that, where that end up. We can set a type. In this case, we're going to build an incremental table. And if we look at the more basic example that we did, we had just had a table, and that is, it just creates a table. Every time it runs all the data, it will remove the old table and create a new one. But here we're going to use an incremental. So we have the option to only update the last 4 days if we want. We will set some tags for this query. And these tags enable us to, when we run an execution, I could say, I want to run all queries that have the tag GA4, for example. And that could be several different ones. So this is a way to access different queries. And we are sending some instructions to BigQuery that the resulting table that you create here, I want to partition it by the date column, and I want to cluster it by the event name column. And this makes it much more efficient when our analysts then are running queries saying that we only want data for the last month. It doesn't have to go through the whole table. So if we look at the event table, one thing that we mentioned was very complex to handle was the event parameters that is nested. We could actually, Anton, should we jump in and just show what we mean with nested data? So I will go into the raw events table, see if I can find a good example. Yes, here we have it. So here, this is row 1. This is one event. The event name is session start. And the event parameters is a nested data structure. So in one row of data, we could then, in a nested data set, have several rows of data. And inside that, we could have even more nested data. So even if we just want to access page location, we have to write a lot of code for it to access this field or this field or this field. But we have prepared that by writing a function called getEventParam. And we will find that in the helpers file. So here we have, if you're used to coding and JavaScript and Python and so on, you know that we can write functions and have them in a library, and then we can include that library and call those functions in our code. So here we have a function called getEventParams that takes, it will take parameters such as what parameter name is it and what is the param type. Is it a string, int, double, and so on? And that will return. That function will help us build the SQL code that is needed and return that into our SQL query. I think we could see that. So let's say we want the page location. This is a very, very clean piece of code here. But that will actually, when we run this query, compile into, oh, I got an error. Now it's fine. It will actually compile into this. So it's a much more structured way to handle complex code in one place. So we're going to unnest some event parameters and some user parameters. We're going to pick up the traffic sources, such as UTM source, UTM medium, and so on. We will prepare a struct with device information. And this is a thing. For how long do we want to go back? How long do we want to pick up data? Well, if we are running a full table refresh, we maybe want to go back a full year. So if we're going to refresh the whole table that we're going to do now, we're going to go with a kickoff date that is maybe 1 year back. But if we just this morning are running an incremental run, so we just want to update the last 4 days, an incremental run, well, we want to take today's date minus 4 days. Okay. And in that, if we're running an incremental run, we want to prepare the resulting data set by removing the last 4 days as well. Otherwise, we will get duplicates. So we remove the last 4 days in resulting tables and bring in the last 4 days. I will show you this when we run the query. So the events table is pretty simple, and also we're calculating previous and next page location using a window function for easier funnel analysis. So this query will run first, and then we will have the session query that is a bit more complex. We will make sure that we pass documentation to the resulting table. So based on the events table, we're using ref function, so it understands in what order the functions need to run. And the big thing, and we're not going to go through all the steps, is that we calculate session attribution. So we look at, for example, referral. Is the referral part of our self-referral list that we have in the constants? This could be authentication services or payment gateways and so on. Then we say, this is not a referrer. This is part of the journey on site. We check if we have a Google Click ID and if we want to bring in data from Google Ads in that case and get the campaign name from Google Ads. And then we do a look back of 30 days. So we look if the traffic source for this session is null. We don't have a traffic source. We have not identified one. Well, for this user ID, we look back 30 days and see if Anton had a traffic source in the last 30 days. In that case, we grab that one. Otherwise, it's still null. And then to make it a bit clearer, we translate any null values to direct. Okay, we couldn't find the traffic source, it's direct. And the last thing we do is that we run our, there it is, our channel group helper function. So coming this far, we only have source, medium, campaign, and then we have prepared a helper functions. It's called get default channel group, where we try to bucket these different traffic sources into channel groups, saying, okay, this was display, or this was email, or generic paid search, and so on, or organic search. Or else it's unassigned if we couldn't find the correct one. Sessions, yes. Okay, so let's run these 2 queries. Or I can have that open. And we will start an execution, execute actions. And instead of selecting the files, I'm going to use tags instead. And we have the GA4 tag, and that tag I have applied in both files. So it will pick up both files, yes. And we will run it with a full refresh. So we will say, we don't want an incremental run, we want a full refresh. And we will go into the workflow execution, and we can see that the session tables understand, okay, I have to sit down and wait for the event table to finish. And we'll see how long time this takes. I should have limited it so it doesn't run that many days. Oh, 21 seconds. So the event table was successful, and the session table then sees that, okay, that is my signal. I am starting to run. In a second, when we refresh, we will see that it finished. Both finished successfully. And the neat thing here is that if one of these tables failed to run, we could set up, it will send an error message, and we could catch that and maybe send an email to someone saying, it didn't run as expected, or handle it in different ways. We will jump, and we will jump into the table. They are in the Dataform dataset. Refresh. Okay, great. So here we have the event table that we just created, and we will look at that. So we have all our events neatly prepared. We have some blank session IDs, and this is because I think this property is using advanced consent mode. So here we have page title, page location, potential other event parameters that we unnested, UTM, if these events had UTM parameters on their page location, device information, and so on. And if it was a page view, we also calculated the previous and the next page location. So nice and tidy data ready for analyzing on this Friday. And if we would jump into the session table and we preview it. So here in this table, every row is a session. So row 1 is one session. We have the session ID. So we could use that ID to link to the events table and say, okay, I want all events that belong to this session. We have some information such as what was the landing page, the first page view. But we also have all the pages in a session in a comma-separated list. And this is really good for if I want all sessions that in one way or another visited this part of the site. We have device category, and if we go over here, yes, here we have the first attribution struct, and this is the direct. So this session was attributed to LinkedIn Social, and then we have the last click 30-day look back, and that will be the same, but let's see if we can find one. Here we have a few direct, 1, 2, 3, but they didn't have another traffic source in the last 30 days. So, but we have the traffic source available, nice and tidy. And yes, I'm also going to show the details for this. Schema. And if you remember, we took some time writing column descriptions and also table descriptions, and that will end up here on the schema. We see that our columns now have descriptions, so our analysts understand what they are querying. And under details, here is the description for the table. And we can also see that if it's successfully was partitioned by date. So before we close this demo, we will try to write a quick query. And I think you, Anton, you have to help me here since I'm coding live. We're going to query for all events. Format. So we can go maybe 1st of April. So we are querying the events table, and I probably want to reference and call it events, events.date. Very simple query there to start off. Yes. We want, let's say we want to build a page location report. So we want the page location. And we can also do event name, just to confirm. And we want event name equal. We only want the page view. We don't care about the other events. Let's confirm. Yes. So already here, we didn't have to unnest the page location. It's available for us. But now our stakeholders say, I also want to see the source for these, where these page views, where did the user come from? Okay, you say, we want to join in the session table that we just created. Sessions, and remember that we used the session ID as key. So this is how they join together, sessions.session ID. See if it, no, okay. Yeah, it finds date in both tables. Perfect. And then we could bring in the sessions. What did we call it? The last click 30 channel group as well. Great. Oh, it didn't find channel group role. Okay, so we have just, with a few lines of code, written a report where that accesses the page location and joins it with traffic source attribution. And maybe we want to have if it wants a bounce or not this session. And this will require a lot more code to write, I can assure you. And that was the end of this demo, actually. And we're going to jump back here. And I just want to remind you that the code that I just showed for GA4, it's available on our GitHub account. If you run into any problems, you can send me a DM on LinkedIn or email me. And if you need help with setting up Dataform and BigQuery for your company organization, just reach out and we can definitely help you with that. So I see Anton is back. Do we have any questions or what are your thoughts? We have a few minutes.
Yes. So everyone, if you have questions, just write it in the QA or in the chat. I will try to pick it up. I can start off with one question. So if you want to get started with Dataform, what's the level of coding experience that you need? Also have both SQL and JavaScript here.
I would say that not much. I mean, you probably know SQL all on beforehand, so you have worked in BigQuery writing SQL, you understand tables and so on. Going into Dataform, it doesn't really require you to use like very advanced code skills. You can start off very basic. I don't know if I said, but Dataform uses JavaScript. If you have worked with DBT previous, that uses Python. So it's different flavors, very similar. But I wouldn't say that you need that much coding skills. You can get a long way just with SQL and some very basic JavaScript skills.
All right. I can also add in another question. You had this distinction between the data engineer and the analyst, working like the data engineer to the left, prepping the tables, working with definitions, and to the right you have the analyst.
Yeah.
Would you say that this is more of an anecdotal example, or is it more common that the digital analyst is kind of involved in different parts of this in the pipeline?
Yeah, definitely. You don't need a data engineer certification or exam for this. This is more that you have two different hats. Yeah. So you take on this hat and you prepare these tables in Dataform, and then you change hat and you put on the analyst hat using these tables for querying. Because a mistake many people do is that, okay, I only have the analyst hat and I jump straight into the events raw tables. Yes, that could be quick. You could get some quick results. But as we showed here, it will add up over time into this spider web. So no, it could be the same person. Definitely doesn't require that much engineering skills. It's just to get it into people's mind that there are different mindsets, prepping the data and then using the data.
Great.
And I will show that I can spell library. Yes.
I can also add in some of my experiences from this. In some projects, we definitely do everything of this ourselves. So it's basically a one-man show to set this up and create something that stakeholders can see. So the visualization, normally done in Looker Studio or Tableau. But we also have larger organizations where we actually have this setup, where there will be lots of stakeholders using the data, and those stakeholders are not only like business stakeholders. It could be analysts or data savvy people, but they know tracking data. That's not their subject matter expertise. While in that setup, we actually are the more of the data engineer we have the data engineer hat on, and we serve data to the organization.
Yeah.
We also have another question here from Drausen. Since GA4 export happens at different time each day, what's the best approach to initiating Dataform queries once GA4 export is completed?
Great question. Yes, we don't know the exact time when a GA4 export happens. So what we have opted for, and what I found is the best approach, is that when the GA4 export happens, it will create a new table in BigQuery. That will be logged into a tool in GCP called cloud logging, saying, okay, a new table was just created. And what you can then do is create a sort of trigger that sits and listens for when this happens. And we will use that trigger to trigger what is called a workflow in GCP. And that workflow will then call our Dataform repository and say, hey, now it's time to run the GA4 update. I will definitely write a blog post explaining all those steps because we have that prepared as well in code examples. So that is the best way I have found, using Cloud Log to listen for when a new table is created. So I will get back to with a blog post explaining that in depth with code examples. And I also posted in the chat my first Dataform blog article that I wrote, that it sort of goes through what we have said today, what is the benefits and so on. And I'm also going to write a blog article on how to create your first repository, connecting it to GitHub and so on. So you have all that in one place.
Great. Right on time, I would say.
Yeah. And if you have any questions later this weekend when you sit coding, just reach out on LinkedIn. Follow me there. I try to write a lot about Dataform and BigQuery. Anton writes a lot about BigQuery and GA4 as well, so follow him on LinkedIn. And hopefully see you soon again. And enjoy the sunny weather if you have this wonderful Friday.
I can also add in that if you have colleagues or just for yourself, you can watch this webinar after because it's recorded, and you can actually use the sign up link if you want someone else to see it, and register now, even if we completed it, and you will get the recording.
Yeah, everyone will get the recording, so you have that.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a nice evening or
Bye-bye.
Friday, weekend. Bye.